Warm welcome to everybody who's just joined us. It's nice to see everyone rushing in, which is great. Just a reminder, this is the Galen Growth mid-year 2024 digital health, global digital health ecosystem key trends. It's an analyst briefing. We have been doing these at least biannually as we look to the full year and the mid-year. For those of you who follow us, you'll see that we also do quarterly blogs to pick up the Q1 and Q3 trends. So yes, a warm welcome. We'll get going, as many of you seem to have rushed through the door, which is great news. It is certainly warm here in Switzerland. We're very lucky to have our second day of summer. We're very excited. My name is Julian de Salaberry. I'm the CEO and the founder of Galen Growth. Galen Growth, who you don't know us very well, is a pioneering global think tank, which is focused on advancing digital innovation. We've got about a decade of unparalleled expertise where we consistently deliver cutting-edge research, analytics, and insights for industry leaders and for investors, as well as, of course, the innovators themselves. We have offices in Singapore, in Basel, Switzerland, and in Chicago, in the US. Everything you'll see data-wise is powered by a platform called Health Alpha, which is proprietary to Galen Growth and to our clients who subscribe to the platform, and is now the #1 resource for digital health data, intel, insights for verticals such as pharmaceuticals, for example, insurers, business consulting firms, health systems, etc., etc. It is the power, the data behind the report you see today, and of course, all of our reports and our online articles, aka blogs. Health Alpha is AI-powered digital health insights. It allows us to do signaling such as alpha forecasting, as well as, of course, provide a state-of-the-art workflow, such as, for example, insights on demand flashcards. If you don't know what those are, you'd like to know more, feel free to reach out to myself after this webinar. So today is a focus on the first 6 months of 2024, period of 1st of January to 30th of June inclusive. And it is the detail behind the blog that some of you may have read, which we published on the 1st of July. There's a lot of distraction out there. I've seen many numbers banded around and many other articles and reports. Most of them either completely underreporting the space or arriving very, very late in the day in terms of providing with any useful insights. What we want to do is what we usually do at Galen Growth is certainly level off in context around some of the contextual global numbers, but let's get beyond those numbers and really understand what's truly happening. This report is free to download. So just go to our research page, download it. It is 80+ pages of data, of charts, and of course, insights from the Galen Growth research team. And this precedes our regional reports, which will probably publish at the end of July, but those are premium only for our clients. So this one, to repeat, is free of charge. We love your questions. In fact, it helps steer the conversation more than us just mind-numbingly going through our own script. So please feel free to ask your questions. I would ask, though, that you try and use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens rather than a chat function. Then we know it is a question. So please feel free to ask your questions. Let me introduce Sarah. Some of you have met Sarah. Some of you have heard Sarah speak before. Sarah is our head of research and analytics for Europe and for the US. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Julian.
So, as we navigate through 2024, it'd be good to reflect on some of the significant shifts and trends that have been shaping the sector or the vertical over the past 6 months, particularly on the back of 23, which some people may describe as annus horribilis. Throughout 2023, digital health saw really notable consolidation, heightened investor scrutiny, and a retreat of investments. We can touch on that if we want to, but let's look forwards here. We certainly saw health systems focusing on operational efficiency, major tech firms strategically leveraging their AI and Gen AI type capabilities to the advantage of the digital health ecosystem. Again, we'll touch on that, no doubt, in this quick webinar. In the first quarter of 24, we observed stabilization, which is welcomed, of course, by all. And in Q1, we did see an impressive 5.3 billion being reported globally across 383 deals. Sarah's already given you a sneak preview of what happened in H1 as a whole. The one noteworthy point I would say about Q1, which got everyone very excited in my neck of the woods, and that is that Europe recorded certainly a 22% increase compared to the previous period. So very encouraging signs at the end of Q1. So we were very eager to see how Q2 would perform, and therefore how it would see us land at H1. So as I said, feel free to ask questions. We're looking forward to those. So as we set the midway point of 2024, we believe that we sit at a crucial checkpoint to evaluate the current state of the digital ecosystem over the past 6 months, and of course, to try and determine whether we have turned the corner. So let's get started then. So Sarah, let's do our usual format. I'm going to ask some questions and allow you to answer them, as you are really the architect and one of the authors of the report. Leave you to leverage what material you need to answer these questions. But let's start with my questions. And when I see questions coming through from the Q&A, I'll switch to those. But start with my questions. So we reported this, these metrics for H1 long before anybody else on the 1st of July. But I wanted to make sure that we baseline today. So can you help us by sharing what the total global funding has been and across how many deals if we look at the first 6 months? The answer's on the screens.
Answers on the screen, but I'm gonna apologize for the technical difficulties. I don't know, for some reason my my tech is failing me today, but anyway, that's okay. You see a sneak preview of the next slide here. I can't even move forward. This is going to be a challenge. So my arrows aren't even working. Page down. No, down one more. Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to go here. Nope. So in total, 12.4 billion. So we're up 5% year on year from H1 last year, where we saw about $11.6 billion in funding across the globe. And this year we had 719 deals, which, if I could show you the next slide, is down from H1 2023. So that means, what does that mean? That means we have an increased overall venture funding value this half compared to the first half last year, but we have a decrease in the number of deals. Anyone who's any good at math then could put together A plus B and know that that means the deal value is going up. Julian, I believe that's your next question. And I'm
very, very keen, because Q1, of course, we reported in April. And so very keen to get an understanding of how Q2 performs, so that we get a sense of how did the cadence change between the first 3 and the last 3 months of this half, and what can we conclude, if anything, for example, around average deal size.
Absolutely. I am going to share a different application because.
Okay, cool. I'm sure we'll hold on to get the slides. It does help give
exactly.
the answers. Okay, let's go for that version then.
We're going to go for this one. So
okay, cool. Thank you.
Much easier for me to navigate here. Right. So this shows kind of the full picture of what's been going on. Of course, we had the 2021 peak, and then, as Julian, as you mentioned earlier in the webinar, 2023 was just pretty much miserable the whole year long. The decreasing number of deals, and that pretty much, well, we could say it stabilized at the end of last year, and remained through Q1. Right. What we've really seen is that jump in Q2 in the deal value, and that's what we're hoping will sustain. The indications we have really is, okay, you have the geopolitical forces basically staying the same, but we've been talking to a lot of investors. We were at Health Europe, Julian, last month, and there's really an increasing, they've been holding on to their investment dollars, but now finally releasing some of those investment dollars, and that's what we see really in Q2 2024. The deal value, as you see, jumping way up. In the second quarter, you have a lot more deals. A lot of that, as you know, we include Zera Therapeutics in our numbers. So there's definitely at least a 500,000 increase in deal size due to that deal alone. But a lot of other deals, you see the deal value going up.
Cool. Okay, so that gives us a sort of a starting point to this conversation. in terms of how Q2 performed this Q1. And we see a significant uptick in confidence, let's call it that, driven by deal size increasing as well. But drilling into that a little bit, and one of the things we've been doing at Gale and Growth for the last 18 to 24 months is measuring what we call funding strength to get a sense of the funding stress, I guess, that exists in the system. And what we were seeing for quite some time, of course, was the period of time between two funding raise by any digital startup getting longer and longer and longer. And therefore, you assume stress is being inbuilt in the system. So how has funding strength, I guess, evolved over the past 6 months, particularly as we see this renewed investor confidence?
Funding strength, if we look at it one slide at a time. There we go. As you mentioned, we were seeing over the past quarter for quarter that percentage of ventures that were raising funding going down, right? Fewer ventures had raised in the past 18 months, looking quarter on quarter. And now, if you look across, this is the historical view across 3 different major regions within digital health. Let's first, North America. You had at the end of last year, only 38% of ventures had raised in the last 18 months. Sorry, these are growth stage ventures. Now Q1, you hit 40%, and now Q2, 42%. So that's a very positive outlook of those amount of ventures raising in the last 18 months going up. Europe, APAC are staying constant. APAC went up very slightly. So at least, hey, we're not going down. North America is going up. It's usually the driver of the trends. So we hope to see that trend carry over into APAC and Europe very soon.
Okay.
If you look over the stages, the different venture funding stages, right? Focusing here on the last 18 months, almost nearly 50% of late stage ventures have raised funding in the last 18 months. So it's a very good sign.
Certainly positive. And I guess we were hoping that was the case, and we will continue to track that very carefully as we track through H2. It's worth noting as well that those people who have got a subscription to HealthTech Alpha are able to see this themselves by looking at the dashboard that we have within HealthTech Alpha, which actually gives you the funding strength as you look at various ecosystems. So it does update depending on what lens you place on it. So a question from Michelle about oncology. We'll answer that when we get to our quick look at therapeutic areas, but I just want to acknowledge the fact the questions come in. So thank you for the question. If we look at funding, there's been much talk over the past, I would suggest 9 months, the topic of unlabeled rounds. In other words, with valuations being quite so disputed, investors have favored getting into rounds that are not calling for a new valuation. So if we bear those in mind and we look at what that scenario looks like in H1 2024, what can you tell us around unlabeled rounds?
Yeah, if we look at unlabeled rounds, as you mentioned, as ventures, the valuations were coming down, ventures weren't so excited to show the value of the funding rounds they were raising, and they didn't want to give them a name, right? They couldn't go up to the next stage. And so that's what here what we show within our report and what we've analyzed is looking at how many of those funding rounds didn't report a value, right? We know they raised funding, but they didn't tell us exactly how much funding because they didn't want that perception of a reduced valuation. And when you look especially at the late stage rounds, right, you see that the number here of undisclosed deal size, which is the top gray part, really going up, and that's continued within the first half of this year, very much so. Now you're looking at 30% of late stage deals aren't disclosing the deal value. That is actually mostly maintained stability over growth stage rounds, gone down slightly in growth stage rounds, and you'll see looking into this half in specific, it's really, we see a big boom in the growth stage rounds. So they really profited this half and their early stage rounds has remained constant to 2023, right? So it's definitely a trend that's continuing for the late stage funding rounds, is that not disclosing the deal value and not really putting themselves into a category where you can do evaluation based on that particular funding round. That is especially true within North America, right? And Europe, you see the non-disclosed deals increasing. APAC, you see it increasing. North America, perhaps a correction on what I just said, is staying relatively stable. So this trend actually, as I mentioned, North America is usually ahead of the trend curve as far as they're the leaders, and then the others follow. So with North America staying stable over the past 3 years, hopefully then we see that carrying off over to Europe and APAC, and this increasing trend of increasing undisclosed deals then will be reduced in the second half of the year, or perhaps next year. Hopefully will go away, so we have a little bit more clarity on what's going on across the ecosystem.
Okay, thanks for that. Let's switch gears a little bit. Whenever we speak to C-suite of digital health ventures, one of the topics that keeps coming up, of course, which is critical to them, is partnerships. They're very keen to understand the lay of the land on partnerships, and of course, what the trends are, particularly within their own space. If we look at it at an aggregate level, and we look at partnerships with the lens of the fact that it's critical to scaling, and then we start looking at volume trends, you know, the volume of partnerships that have been ongoing. Despite funding being sluggish, what are we seeing as being happening for partnership trends during the first 6 months of this year? And are we still seeing the same center of gravity?
We saw a lot of the same, Julian, a lot of that increasing partnership trend, although the end of last year slowed down. Q2 funding picked up, and you see the partnerships have skyrocketed, 29% jump from Q1 to Q2. Right, so that's definitely a big part of the optimism that we're seeing going into the second half of the year, is like you said, that jump in partnership trends. Surprisingly enough, yes, all regions jumped. APAC jumped a lot. I know this isn't an APAC webinar, but a small plug for the APAC region is you really see a jump in partnerships. Although the funding has stayed more or less the same, China continues to dwindle, the APAC partnerships have jumped up. So a lot of interest going into the second half of the year in APAC, but across the globe in general, right? And you asked about the distribution, right? Where are those partnerships being formed? Health systems, as we know, were a huge force at the end of last year and continue to be a huge force. I'll show you that on my second slide. Here, you see the clusters, the digital health clusters that we're looking at are really medical diagnostics and health management solutions tying for the top spot here. Health management solutions and medical diagnostics, both are very central to health systems, right, and the partnerships being built there. What we see is research solutions here jumping into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th place, very much down at the end of last year because it's a very small cluster, but tech, another name for research solutions would be tech bio. Tech bio, as it's becoming a huge topic for investment, and pharma companies bring to solve their problems there. That research solutions cluster is jumping up, although it's not even in the top 5 as far as the number of ventures, right? So a lot going on in health systems and research solutions.
Cool. All right. So same sort of centers of gravity, building, I guess, greater momentum, greater strength when it comes to partnerships with.
Yeah, the centers of gravity are really, as you mentioned, health systems, and then building their digital health portfolio, trying to address the operational efficiencies, right, with AI, Gen AI, and then tech bio with the drug discovery and Gen AI.
Cool. Well, let's take a look at Gen AI and AI for a minute. So all the talk of last year, the darling of investors. I saw some report a few weeks ago that was talking about the share of funding that was going towards AI as a whole. We're talking across the whole tech, all the verticals. So I'm particularly interested in seeing how that is doing. If we look at digital health innovation across the globe, is AI, for all its various components, Gen AI, ChatGPT, various other names that can be used. Is it running away with the prize? Is that where all the money's going that we've all seen the upsurge for?
Let's see here. Here's talking about the centers of gravity, right? We look at tech. In particular, we just talked about the research solutions capturing a lot of the funding. And here tech, which is the Gen AI is bringing in the tech partnerships. Tech is jumping in to help a lot with those with the Gen AI and a lot of the algorithms, more advanced AI algorithms. Looking at AI specifically here, jumping into the numbers just for the ventures that use AI or that need the AI algorithms, those particular ventures raised 7.1 billion this half. And that is actually 57% of all funding raised this half. So let's say that in a different way. 57% of the funding this half went to ventures that are using AI and advanced AI algorithms. Right? That's over half. So very much up from 2023 and 2022. So there's definitely a focus there from investors going to the ventures using AI. But what do those ventures look like exactly? Because that's kind of what I want to get into. So because funding it's very interesting. If you talk to any investor, they talk about AI. So you know there's a lot of funding going that way. But digging into the ecosystem itself, right, AI and Gen AI within digital health, 40% of all ventures within digital health are using some sort of AI algorithm, right? That's where you see that 57% of venture funding is going to this 40% of ventures, right? So definitely over proportion. Gen AI, right, and any sort of generative transformers and as you mentioned, Julian, you can give it many different names. That's still a very small part of the ecosystem, right? You're still talking about 2% of the digital health ecosystem, a small percentage, right? So small percent. If you look at AI as a whole, you're looking almost a quarter being medical diagnostics ventures, 16% patient solutions, including disease management, digital therapeutics, and then 16% health management solutions. Finally, wellness and research solutions. That's the distribution of ventures using leveraging the AI. Now, leveraging Gen AI in particular is the dark blue slice of the pie. We left out wellness because it's less than 1% using Gen AI. Really, where you see the Gen AI ventures coming in are the research solutions, right? That tech bio that are doing the drug discovery, generating new molecules, generating patient populations in order to test out, in silico, new drugs and new formulations, right? So 10% of all tech bio ventures are leveraging Gen AI technology. That goes down to 3%, which is still an overproportion for health management solutions and medical diagnostics. So this is where your center of gravity is when it comes to Gen AI. So it's a very interesting look at the ecosystem, understanding Gen AI is still a very small part of digital health. It's getting a foothold in some clusters, but it's still growing, still very small. Despite that, there's a lot of funding going into the area.
Okay, so that's interesting that we are seeing a shift that way, but of course not as pronounced as we are led to believe by much of the hype in the media in relation to Gen AI. But of course, one we are tracking very closely at Galen Growth, particularly through the lens of the tag we have for Gen AI in Health Tech Alpha. I'm going to drill into Michelle's question now before looking at some of the success stories and failures of the ecosystem very quickly. But if we do stick to the detail below what we're seeing here and look at therapeutic areas and look at digital health categories, in other words, the drivers of this. So you've already touched on the categories or clusters with this slide. So we'll look at that very quickly. I'm very keen to understand, as is Michelle, in terms of her question on oncology. If we look at, therefore, H1 trends and where funding is coming into therapeutic areas, as in the therapeutic areas that's been declared as a primary area by the digital health venture, what does that trend look like? Because I know there's been some movement, particularly, say, in the US over the past 6 months. Anyway, over to you on that one. And then, of course, let's look at how that's trending as far as the clusters are concerned, particularly the ones you've just been showing us.
I was gonna have Jenny answer you. No, just kidding. Let's look at the at those therapeutic areas like you mentioned. Is oncology still on top? Absolutely, oncology is still on top. You have what we see here are the therapeutic areas, the top 10 therapeutic areas over the past 5 years, and the venture capital investment is on the y-axis. So you see oncology is still very much on the top of those bubbles, as it has been for the last 5 years. Now, mental health, this half had a huge jump, right? And mental health is then also nearing the top of the therapeutic areas, and that is primarily within the U.S. U.S. ventures had definitely a surge in mental health coming in, and a lot of that goes back to AI, right? Being able to slowly bring the AI into some of the therapeutic areas. Oncology is still has that big focus, as most of you know, has been in research solutions. So as the tech bio, the research solutions for pharmaceutical drug discovery continues to increase momentum, right? Using drug design, using Gen AI, that oncology I would expect to stay on top, because there's a lot of movement going on there as far as personalized medicine and getting very much smaller patient population, or drug design for smaller patient populations within oncology. And let me dive a little bit further into this, because this graphic shows you a lot about what's going on in digital health in the therapeutic areas. The x-axis is the global venture volume, right? So you would expect, as you increase venture volume, more ventures, then your funding is going to increase. We're not looking at funding per venture, we're talking about total value of funding. And so that is indeed the case here, mental health being the largest therapeutic area within digital health, followed by oncology, women's health, and neurology. So those are also the top 3 as far as volume. The size of the bubble indicates the number of deals this half, and so as your value increases, so does the number of deals, right? So when you look at therapeutic areas, you're going to get what you would expect to get. The larger therapeutic areas are getting more funding and more deals. Julian, can I jump into the clusters, or did you have something?
Yeah, no, please, because I'm conscious of time.
Yeah.
We've certainly addressed the question around therapeutic areas here, and I noticed myself in our own analysis how mental health had seen a resurgence. But let's look at clusters and align that to, of course, the center of gravity conversation we had.
Just a quick look at that, because here you see the outlier being research solutions, right? Very much a small cluster with lower venture volume, but that the pharma, the tech bio, research solutions, all kind of going into one topic being research solutions, and that capturing the most funding in this half of the year. The other center of gravity we talked about was hospitals, addressing some of the operational efficiency topics that can now be addressed with automated billing, or Gen AI assisted billing, Gen AI assisted clinical note taking. That's all here in the health management solutions, which took that second place spot as far as funding value, is also the largest cluster for venture volume. So that's where you see here kind of what's going on as far as the clusters and the center of gravities we've been talking about.
Yeah, nice to see those trends shaping up. And no questions at this stage so far. Please feel free to ask your questions. as we're going. Of course, if you want to download the report, you can also come back to us as well. All right, well, let's thanks for that, Sarah. Let's switch gears a little bit and try and look at let's say at what I call at the venture level. So we looked at Funding Global. We've dived into some of the other building blocks within the ecosystem. If we look at ventures themselves, I just want to create a bit of contrast here. So if we look at the past 12 months, certainly in the media, we've seen a hell of a lot of traffic around high-profile failures. More specifically, let's say ongoing consolidation rather than big crashes. What does that picture look like as we, I guess, take time at the halfway point of 24? And I'm particularly interested in the analysis you guys have done in relation to SPACs. Of course, they were all the fancy, trendy, everyone loves SPACs, and then we've had nothing but bad news since the start. So are we going to see SPACs back, do you reckon?
Well, we've seen a lot of bad news about SPACs. Despite that, the first half of the year we've still seen 3 new SPACs. So I can't say they're all bad, right? There was a huge hype back in 2021. All the ventures were going public, using this at that point a new vehicle for digital health, and there were a lot of inflated valuations as it were across the ecosystem. Right, this year, 90 so far in the year, 96 acquisitions, which is set to outpace 2023 in total. 5 IPOs, which is a great signal that the public market is becoming attractive again for digital health. But if we look at those SPACs, and this is the IPO and SPAC deals that have ended in acquisition in 2024, right? Ventures that have gone public and have now been acquired, either for a profit or not for a profit. Many of them undisclosed deals, so you can't really say. But Science 37, one example, went public via SPAC in 2021, $250 million deal at that point, and was acquired for $38 million. Achille was one of the very high-profile ventures this spring, which was essentially sold for $34 million acquisition price after a SPAC of $412 million back in 2022. So only 2 years on the public market, and now the valuation that's absolutely crashed on Achille. So there are unfortunately a lot of high-profile cases of ventures that had gone public via SPAC and now being sold off for the pieces. But what can we say about that as a whole? You're going to, these were pioneers in their spaces, right? Because they weren't successful isn't surprising. Now, hopefully, we expect that this is going to strengthen the ecosystem as a whole. The pieces will be sold then to, in the report I have to whom they were sold. Pieces will be sold to other parts of the ecosystem, and that will strengthen then the ecosystem as a whole, is really our optimistic way of looking at this particular unfortunate but necessary part of ecosystem growth.
Oh, sure. No, I agree. And we have a point of view again in growth that this is only strengthening the ecosystem as opposed to being solely bad news. Listen, I know that we have included in the global report, of which we're showing a sample set of slides today, a number of success stories. I wanted to pick one. I wanted to pick on Sword Health, largely because it is a European success story in the US. It's something that I think is important to reflect on. So with that in mind, can you give us a quick idea or a quick feel for Sword Health, what it's achieved, and I guess to some extent why we think it is becoming a huge success story in the US?
Absolutely. Sword Health, as you mentioned, is a Portuguese, was initially incorporated in Portugal, quickly moved to New York to build the venture there in New York. I'm trying to look here into Sword Health is again one of these ventures that raised a lot of funding in 2021, and then kind of went quiet as they were reached unicorn status in 2021, but were then unable to increase that valuation, or have been challenged to increase that valuation over the past few years. This year, they just announced then another funding round. We're considering a D1 round, but kind of an extension rather than trying to increase, then going on to a Series E round. Sword Health is a great example. It's a digital therapeutics venture in pain, musculoskeletal. Doing a lot of online, like I said, introduction of AI tools right this year, including a chat bot to increase the interaction between the patient and the application. They had a big Costco partnership at the end of 2023 that really pulled the application almost into the, let's say, to a larger patient population. You see here, let's look at a little bit of their scores. For their their maturity is very much at 81.7, so very high. Partnership signal includes that big Costco partnership, and then evidence signal is very high, and that's because they're very active in publication, right? Using peer-reviewed publication to publish some of their results, to show that they have the evidence that their solution does work and it is effective on patients. They also have multiple clinical trials for their application. So they're very, very much dedicated to showing, proving the evidence that their solution works. It's a great venture, good team, high innovation with the number of applications that they have, good finances and momentum. Like I said, a little bit lower than the rest, but since that funding round, there was a large gap between the two funding rounds. Momentum is on the recovery, is moving up again. So you see the average for their ecosystem is in the light blue. They're way outpowering the average. This is our alpha forecaster showing that there's a good reason why they got funding this year, and that's because they were outperforming their peers in basically the entire 360 evaluation that we do of ventures.
Great, thanks. I'm conscious of time, otherwise I'd dive into that a bit more, because I think it's I've always found that a very fascinating analysis. Let's look at proof points. You touched on evidence signal, for example. Certainly what we heard a lot of and what we were advocating a lot of during the course of 2023 was, the dynamics of investing and changing away from good stories and FOMOs to pathway to profit demonstrated, to clinical evidence, to other proof points such as reimbursement, etc. What can you tell us around the way in which proof points, and more specifically look at clinical evidence, how that has evolved a little bit in the last 6 months, particularly as we've seen that changing dynamics of the investment ecosystem?
Clinical evidence is, maintains to be a lot of discussion about it. It's critical that ventures show their solutions work on the target patient population. And H1 2024 is on track to keep up with 2023 as far as publications, regulatory approvals, and clinical trials, right? So there's not much of a surprise there. I think it's more of a lot of what we've seen as far as evidence goes. Still mostly in the medical diagnostics patient solutions, right? Digital therapeutics is here in the patient solutions cluster. Health management solutions, there is a bit of a surprise. Health management solutions has moved from place 5 to place 3 as far as the share of ventures with significant clinical evidence, and that really has a lot to do with the physician decision support tools that are being used within the health systems. Those are required to show evidence that they work, right? We're not really talking about the automated billing or anything like that. These are the decision support tools that have to be able to show proof of effectiveness. You can look across the therapeutic areas, see how strong they are, but here the front runner is absolutely Europe when it comes to the share of ventures with evidence signal greater than 40, right? And that means significant clinical evidence. That has been last year the case, and remains the case, that the European ventures are very strong when it comes to clinical evidence.
True, that's a trend we have seen for a little while now. It's good news, but of course we do have other challenges in the European ecosystem as a whole in terms of fundamentals. Very conscious of time in terms of the many other things we could discuss, and I guess we could field some more questions. To close off this very quickly, Sarah, obviously we've only shown very few of the data and charts that we have in the full report, and it's 80 pages in total. But I guess our sense in terms of where we are in digital health ecosystem globally is that we are sensing renewed confidence in the ecosystem, which is much needed because, of course, that tends to mean that we'll see, of course, investors starting to deploy lots of the dry powder they're sitting on, but also other activities which kind of are linked to that sort of domino effect, I guess, which means that we should hopefully see the mindset, the sentiment, let's say, in digital health across the globe, particularly in Europe and in the US, change for the better as we head through the next 6 months of the year. Would also, though, say caution, largely because large organizations like pharmacos are incessantly and forever restructuring, which is hampering their ability to really take real lead in some of the partnerships that they are building. And of course, health systems have their own complexities to overcome as well. So the business case is clearly there. It's how they implement that. But we're very excited about that change of the sentiment, I guess, and that renewed confidence, which means we should see some exciting developments between now and the end of the year. Is it fair to say that we are on track to exceed last year? Sorry.
If the ecosystem stays on track, as we've seen in H1, we're definitely on track to exceed 2023. So we're very excited to keep track of that. And as you mentioned, some of those new things when Lilly Direct came online, really pushing the digital portion of care direct from the pharma companies. There are a lot of new developments and exciting things going on so far in H1 2024. Keep an eye on the IPOs because those are very exciting to see.
Yeah, true. Hopefully we'll see. We're already seeing, I think, some signs of the IPO, or let's say the investment supply chain, we want to call it, unseizing itself, let's say. Anyway, just a reminder, Ron, this is a free of charge report that you can download. So feel free to download it and analyze in your own time. Feel free to share it with everyone and that and you feel will be interested. And of course, come back to us if you've got any specific questions in relation to it. Again, everything you see data-wise is all HealthTech Alpha. So a subscription to HealthTech Alpha allows you to get access to the data and try and interrogate it and analyze it differently to the way we have done it in the purpose of this report. As Sarah has rightly shown you on your screen, we will be publishing North America brackets US, to be honest, Europe and Asia specific reports at the end of July. These are premium only reports. In other words, our subscribers are the only ones who can access these FOC. They can be purchased standalone. So that's where we are in terms of global ecosystem. It's great to be able to share with you our analysis and our point of view in terms of the global ecosystem, and to do so long before the rest of the ecosystem has had a chance to really understand it. So we've been in a great opportunity, enviable opportunity to help you with your own decision making as you look to the next 6 months. So feel free to reach out with any questions you may have. There was one question though, Sarah, which we don't touch in this report, neither do we touch in the next 3 reports. And you may not have the answer, so feel free to say so. But there's a question around how Latin America and Africa are faring, bearing in mind they're, let's say, rarely mentioned in much reporting.
That's a good question. What we saw this year was very little funding going to Latin and Africa. I think there's investors who were kind of jumping into the further reaching markets back in 2021 have really pulled off and are now doing the more what they consider more secure investing in the primary markets, which is too bad because we saw a lot of activity going on in those 2 areas. So definitely the funding going to those areas has eased off in the first half of this year. Well, last year as well, starting last year and this year has continued. We haven't seen any big trends other than the telemedicine trends in the African ventures. There isn't too much more to report in that area, unfortunately.
and all that data, of course, is on Health Tech Alpha. So if
Absolutely.
you're very interested in LATAM and Africa, in terms of the size of the ecosystem, who's in the ecosystem, who's doing well, look at our scoring mechanisms, then all of that is available on Health Tech Alpha. Right, I think we are out of time. Most people have stayed with us, so thank you very much for staying with us, and thank you for your questions. We always enjoy being able to share some of our analysis live with the ecosystem. But again, this recording will be made available to those of you who have joined us, so you can review or share, and of course, feel free to download the report if you haven't already. Thank you very much, and catch you next time. Thank you, Sarah.
Julian.